should do it. Yeah. So formally, good evening. And tonight I want to speak about a special Yartzeit and birthday combined. It's the 7th of Adar beginning this evening. Today's day was the 6th of Adar, and of course the 7th of Adar, Zayin Ba'Adar, is the Yartzeit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, the Yartzeit is not actually mentioned in the Torah. The only Yartzeit that's actually found in the Torah and mentioned in the Torah is that of Moshe's brother, Aaron. But the Gemara works it out pretty accurately, so that in context, there's no doubt that's the day it happened. So the source for this is the Talmud in Kiddushin. Talmud in Kiddushin, page 38a, tells us that he died on the 7th of Adar. He was also born on the 7th of Adar. But let's start with the date of his Yartzeit. So we work backwards. Moses died, and then it says that they wept for him for 30 days. And then after he died, they crossed the River Jordan, and that's, of course, in the first chapter of the book of Joshua. And the gap was 3 days. And there we are. Prepare your food, your provisions. In 3 days, you're crossing the Jordan. And then there's a date in the 4th chapter of Joshua, tells us that they actually crossed the Jordan River on the 10th day of the first month. So now we're going to work backwards, and we're going to say, okay, so it's 33 days. 30 days were days of mourning, and then 3 more days because they get 3 days notice to get ready to cross the Jordan. So that takes us very clearly to the 7th of Adar, which is not sure if it was a leap year or not that year, and therefore we don't know whether to observe it in the 1st of Adar, 2nd of Adar, but anyway, it's tonight. Tomorrow being the 7th of Adar, and I know many who observe the 7th of Adar, particularly Chevra Kadisha, where they have a special fast day. It's actually observed tomorrow in Adar Sheni for whatever reason. I never really looked into that in any sort of level of detail. So that's as far as Moshe's death, 7th of Adar. Now, here goes the old joke. What do you say to a 120-year-old man on his 120th birthday? Have a nice day. Because somehow we associate lifespan with the lifespan of Moshe. It was 120 years. And we say he passed away on his birthday, was exactly 120 days. And this is from that verse in Dvarim, chapter 31, where it says that Moshe says, I'm 120 years old today. Now, why mention today? What's why say today? And that is because this was actually the day that he turned 120, and that's the day that he left this physical world. So we know that we have both the Yartzeit and the birthday of Moshe. So what we're going to do together is actually look at what is appropriate with somebody on their birthday or Yartzeit, we remember them, is we want to pay tribute to them. But paying tribute to Moshe is not very difficult because that is found in the Torah. And I'm going to quote to you from 2 places in the Torah. This is from the book of Bamidbar, to the end of the portion of Ba'alotcha. There's a crisis. There's a crisis because Miriam and Aaron are uncomfortable with Moshe's marital arrangements. Basically, his marriage is no longer functional in the traditional sense of the word, and they're objecting to this, and they speak against Moshe. They speak about Moshe. They challenge, and they say, "Wait a second! There are lots of prophets out there. Both Miriam and Aaron ourselves, we are a prophet and prophetess, and yet we remain within a normal married relationship. Why is Moshe?" They were suggesting holier than thou, to the extent that he feels that he, should not remain engaged in a marriage with his wife, Tzipporah. And then here we have the Torah actually endorsing Moshe by saying, actually, Moshe himself was very humble. Mikol ha'adam asher pnei adama, the most humble person that ever walked the earth. That's one of the the qualities of Moshe that is endorsed in the Torah by Hashem. Who says about Moshe, well, this is his quality, his absolute extreme humility. There's a lot of discussion about how can a man of that stature be humble. I mean, God speaks to him, as we'll see in a moment, kind of face to face, it seems like. And how could it be that he can be humble, but humble doesn't mean being unaware of your qualities. Humble just means to realize that those are God-given talents, and that any other human being with those same talents may have done the same or better. So that's humility. A person who is not humble, who is arrogant, thinks that his accomplishments are his own, and thinks that only he is uniquely placed in the position of being able to achieve what he did, and that nobody else would have been able to do the same. So that's Moshe Rabbeinu. But then Hashem is going to stand up to Moshe's defense and actually call Aaron and Miriam out and say to them, what are you saying about Moshe? And how can you even compare yourself to Moshe Rabbeinu? And Hashem says the following: when prophets arise, I make myself known to them in visions. I speak to them in the dream. Unlike Moshe, is totally different. The prophecy of Moshe is at a totally different level. It appears that when Hashem speaks to prophets, and we see this in the books of the prophets, there's often a vision of Hashem, chazon, or other similar words with prophets experience things in dreams or in a trance where Hashem appears in the vision, and sometimes it's kind of fantastical, kind of metaphorical visions that they then have to work out how to interpret. So that's the level of prophecy, and Moshe is different. And Moshe's level of prophecy is altogether different. If you look in the laws of prophecy in Rambam, he goes into great detail to explain to us how fundamentally Moshe's prophecy is at a different level than the others. Here is Rashi's interpretation on the words the Mareh Elav et Vada, that the Shechina reveals himself, and Rashi uses the expression a transparent glass, or more literally, I would say, Aspaklari Hameiri is like a shining type of glass, and direct revelation as opposed to dreams or visions. And Hashem continues, I speak to mouth, plainly, not in riddles. He beholds the likeness of Hashem. How then did you not shrink from speaking against my servant Moses? And those words are very powerful, because they kind of denote that, and we're going to come back to that in the second eulogy, the real eulogy. This is the living eulogy. Moshe is still around, and although he's not privy to this conversation, Hashem is talking about him to his siblings. Speak to him face to face. It's not riddles, it's not visions, it's like looking at Hashem. How dare you have spoken about him and compared? And this is what Rashi says about the words pe el pe. He says, I explicitly told him to separate from his wife. And this is because on Mount Sinai, everyone was meant to, the days leading up to the revelation at Har Sinai, all husbands and wives separated, all immersed in the mikveh and prepared for the revelation, the divine revelation on the mountain. Then at the end of it all, look at the text carefully. Hashem says to Moshe, go say to them, get into your tents, which implies, rejoin your wives. You remain here with me. And here, basically Hashem is saying it was my explicit instruction to him that he remain in that what we would call unnatural relationship with his wife, where they were not living as husband and wife wood, as Aaron and Miriam presumably did. So that is a very powerful text where Hashem comes to the defense of Moshe, but explains to us that he's heads and shoulders above all other prophets, and that his level of prophecy supersedes any other levels of prophecy that are ever going to happen. And clearly, Moshe is called Eved Hashem, called the servant of God. His main function was to create that link between the human and the divine, and to bring Torah from the realm of the divine down to the human realm, to the earthly realm, and that is therefore the powerful description of Moshe there in Bamidbar at the end of Behalotcha. Of course, the result of this is that Miriam is punished, and the nation has to wait for a week while she heals from leprosy, from tzaraat, before they can move on. There is another text, and that one is a literal eulogy of Moshe. That one is found at the very, very, very end of the Torah. The last few lines in the Torah scroll, actually interesting debate and discussion who wrote those, because Moshe, couldn't have written them himself, as it describes posthumous events, things that happened after he died. There are two views. One view is that it was Moshe, because the entire Torah was dictated. And can you imagine Moshe sitting with a quill on parchment and writing, and Moses died there and he was buried, and no other like Moses arose, and we'll see the text in a moment, and he's sitting there and crying as he's describing the end of the Torah. There's another view that says that no, it wasn't Moshe. Moshe went up to the words and he died, and then his successor, Yeshua, would have written the last few verses, but the other rabbis in the Talmud are not happy with that. They said, no, that would make the Torah of Moshe incomplete, and that's inconceivable. It must have been Moshe himself who wrote it. So in those final verses of the Torah, there is again an amazing description of Moshe in the Torah, dictated by God, either to Moshe himself or, as I said, to Joshua. Let's look at those final verses of Deuteronomy. And, let's just go straight to it. So Moshe is 120 years old when he died, and it says his eyes were undimmed, his vigor unabated. So until his last day, he was fully functioning. And describes here, in fact, is the 30 days of mourning that the Jews engaged in there in the plains of Moab. Plains of Moab are on the eastern bank of the Jordan River, in what is now geographically, politically, the country, or the still called the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. So that's where they are. Across the river from Jericho. There they are in the plains of Moab, and they remain there for 30 days. And then at the end of those 30 days, as we saw the text earlier, 3 more days warning, and then they cross the river. And here is how the final 3 verses of the Torah read. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, who Hashem singled out face to face. And we're going to look at what Rashi has to say here about face to face, which is not exactly the same as the words mouth to mouth we had earlier. For the various signs and miracles that Hashem sent him to display in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh, against his entire land, including his servants. So that is how Rashi explains this. He says, what does it mean that Hashem knew him face to face? It means that he could kind of, had the red telephone and could just simply talk to Hashem. Proof that he was able to speak to Hashem on demand is that in Dvarim chapter 9, Moshe says, you stay here, and I will hear what God will command regarding you. In Devarim, after the golden calf, he says, now we'll ascend to the Lord. So Moshe is able to kind of go and talk to God. So that's the panim el panim, the face-to-face, the familiarity that Moshe had with Hashem, that clearly, other prophets could talk to God. Well, we can all talk to God, but we don't always get explicit answers, and not necessarily always the answers that we would like to get. So all prophets have the ability to speak to Hashem, but Moshe can summon Hashem and have a conversation with him, a dialogue with him, which places him, heads and shoulders above all the others. And then the final verse of the Torah. For all the great might, Yada Chazaka, strong hand, Morah Gadol, the awesome power that Moshe displayed before all Israel. So what is it that we're talking about here? Great might, awesome power, and something displayed in front of all of Israel. Let's look at Rashi here. Yada Chazaka, strong hand. This is receiving the Torah on the tablets in his hands. We're not just talking about the fact that those tablets were heavy and he carried them single-handedly or to his hands down the mountain and delivered them to the Jews. It's the fact that he had this ability of receiving Torah. And what is the Morah Gadol? Those are the miracles, the awesome, great power miracles that were wrought in the great and terrible wilderness, as quoted by Sifri on Devarim. And what about that last sentence there? So we explained Yad Chazaka, we explained Morah Gadol. What about that last final words of the Torah that Moshe did in the eyes of all of Israel? And the question is, which amazing thing did Moshe do in front of the entire people of Israel? Answer, says Rashi, break the tablets. Break the tablets. Something which Rashi says God endorsed and agreed with, and said, Yasher Koach Sheshibata. We all know Shkoyach, right? Well done for breaking them. Thank you and congratulations. Yasher Kochacha here in the Hebrew. So well done for having broken them. And the Rashi's commentary ends on the word Sheshibarta. You've broken them. So now, what's the big deal? What's the great accomplishment about the fact that Moshe broke the luchot? The commentaries tell us that it was an unbelievable act of self-sacrifice, one which was performed in front of the entire Jewish people, hence the mention of that. The luchot were the covenant that tied the Jewish people and Hashem. Breaking that covenant kind of didn't sever the relationship, but made the offense of the violation of the covenant far less severe. The parable given for this is that there's just been a chuppah, but even before the prince and the princess have been together, the princess has gone off and strayed. Good friend, one of the shushvinim, one of the unterfirs, we would call them today, takes the marriage document and rips it up to minimize the offense, because, can you imagine, they're legally married and she goes off and does terrible things. So the luchot contain the words, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord Hashem, do not worship idols. The Jews have gone off and worshipped idols, breaking the content of the covenant. Moshe smashes the tablets, and with that minimizes the gravity and the repercussion of the sin. Now, as I said earlier, Moshe's main function in this world was that he was that link between the divine and the earthly, between Hashem and the Jewish people. Bringing the luchot down from Mount Sinai onto earth was Moshe's most unbelievable personal achievement. And now he didn't read the rest of the book, so he didn't know there was going to be tablets number 2. We know that because we've read the Torah, we've read the subsequent parashas. As far as Moshe is concerned, well, now we're in trouble, but that relationship with Hashem has been severed. But that's preferable to a situation where Hashem is not going to obliterate the entire Jewish nation. So Moshe, it's kind of sets aside all of that which he personally stands for, Leinekon Israel, in the eyes of the entire Jewish people. It would seem that the last word in Rashi, Shibarta, you broke, appears to be something negative. He broke. But now we've turned it around, because that act of breaking, and normally we always try not to end on a negative note, particularly the last word of Rashi's commentary on Torah. I mean, you could have just, change the sentence around to, for example, Shibarta haluchot yasher, you broke the tablets, well done. But Rashi doesn't do that. He said, well done for having the tablets broken. Shibarta, that's the last word, broken. Why end on that note? But we've just shown that, in fact, the breaking of the luchot was the most unbelievable positive act that Moshe could do selflessly and on behalf of the Jewish people. And that's the final phrase, the final word of the Torah, but also of Hashem's eulogy for him, where Hashem confirms that act of breaking the tablets was actually selfless and laudable. So, as I said, today is the Yartzeit, or tonight, as well as the birthday of Moshe Rabbeinu. Famous story in the Talmud Megillah tells us how Haman chose the date of Purim. Okay, he drew lots. Purim, and that's on Megillah, Talmud Megillah, page 13, and it says that he drew lots. Megillah tells us that he cast a pur, that's the lot. So he put the numbers of the months and numbers of the days, and out came number 11. That's the month of Adar, or number 12 rather, month of Adar, and it was the 13th of Adar, which was the day that he had set aside for destruction of the entire Jewish people. He cast the lots during the month of Nisan, so it was 11 months away still, almost 12 months away. And those were 12 months when the entire plot, tension, and relief of Purim take place over that period. Now, when the month of Adar is pulled out of the lots, Haman is extremely happy, because he sees this as an amazing omen. Why? It's the month during which Moshe died. 7th of Adar, Yartzeit of Moshe. So therefore, kind of a great month for the end of the Jewish people, because that was really his final solution plan: destroy every Jew in the entire empire of Achashverosh, which stretched 127 provinces. Basically, all the inhabited world was under that control of Achashverosh, and now he was going to destroy them all. And the Gemara says he didn't know that Moshe died on the 7th of Adar, but as we know, he was also born on that same day of the 7th of Adar. Now, what is the significance of this? If Haman knew enough of Jewish history to know which day Moshe died, he surely knew enough of Jewish history to realize that Moshe had been born that same day, 120 years earlier. Let's understand how important that was to Haman. As far as he was concerned, he was putting an end to the Jewish people. In his mind, nations fall, nations rise, and nations fall. And so we've seen this throughout the history of the world, that the Greeks and the Romans and the Phoenicians and the Persians all had amazingly great empires that rose to great heights, that expanded territorially over, they became superpowers in the inhabited world, occupied almost every country, and then, lost power. And so, from Haman's perspective, there is also an end to the Jewish history. And just as at that stage, the predecessors would have been the Babylonians, a huge empire had come and gone and been replaced by the Persians and the Medians, and then an alliance between them and so forth. Same thing is going to happen to the Jews. They've well outlasted any other empire. I mean, any other power. The nation, they started several hundred years before, and they've kind of just stuck around and around and around through about 800 years of history. It's too much for him. He says they've got a beginning, and they've got an end. And so where's the end? Their birth was during the month of Nisan, the month during which Moshe took them out of Egypt. And their death, their end will be in the last month, the month of Adar. And in his conception of a history that's linear with a starting point and an ending point, the Jews became a nation in Nisan and would cease to be one during the month of Adar, coupled with the fact that already their downfall began because the initial leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, died during Adar. Amazingly good omen. We can understand why Haman viewed history in a linear fashion, because that's how we all display history. We make timelines. We have big charts that we, all had in our classrooms growing up with a timeline of the world, and we showed what happened in which year, and that's an easy way of understanding history. And on a timeline, it will be beginning of Roman Empire, demise of Roman Empire, and so forth. But on a chart like that, there would be beginning of the Jewish nation in the year 2448 from creation, and that line would carry on and carry on and carry on, and maybe there'd be ups and downs, but the line is still carrying on. Our conception of history is not as a straight line, but as a circle, where everything repeats itself. And so when we celebrate Pesach, as we will in about 5 weeks, and we relive the Exodus, the energy of the original Exodus, the whole concept of freedom, of renewed faith, all that is relived. We think of time as not a circle but a spiral, because with every successive revolution, we go through the same thing again, but we build on it a little bit further. So when comes Pesach, for the 3,334th time now, I think, we're going to relive Exodus, but it's going to be building on all the experiences of before. Next week, when we celebrate Purim, it's the same thing. It's a celebration of Mesirat Nefesh, of the Jewish people who are prepared to give everything up and cling to the faith with Hashem, and of unbelievable miracles. And when we read the Megillah, we make a bracha, Shasani Simla Avotenu Bayamim Hahem Bizman Hazeh. He made miracles for our forefathers in those days. At this time, we were living that energy because we're now at the same spot in that spiral, month of Adar. So we don't see history as a line. As far as Haman was concerned, Moshe was born and then he died, and that's it. But we say, no, look what message is conveyed by the date on which Moshe left this world, the same day on which he was born. Renewal, not death, not end. So this is how we celebrate Yom Tovim, and this is how we celebrate our history, by going back to events that have happened previously, drawing from the energy that radiates on those special days. Now that the world is so sorely in need of a miracle to save it from the turbulence and the turmoil, we're going to make that bracha with much kavanah, with much intent, and say, may Hashem perform miracles for us as he did back then in this season of the year. Thank you very much.